Hey folks, good day. Hope you're having a wonderful day so far. Welcome to another video. Uh, with all this craziness going on economically, a lot of people going broke, losing their homes, ending up out in these streets, in some cases, having to live out of the vehicle. I just came across I just thought of this idea, which I think a lot of people should take heed to, which Uh, back in the day, more people used to take heed to this idea. And it is that idea of maybe one family who might have a substantial amount of money buying a large parcel of land, or two, maybe as a family, you know, you can, as a family, different members of the family can go in and invest on a large parcel of land. And then that way, multiple families will be able to have a place to stay, cutting down the cost of housing substantially. And this is what I mean. Now the picture you're looking at right now is a house that's currently for sale outside of the Yorktown, Indiana city. Now this house is not in the city limits; it's in the country. And for this example, I made sure that I picked a location that was within an hour of a major city just to stay within, my rules, so to speak, when it comes to buying a house. Because, like I told you guys the other day, if I ever do relocate again, I'm going to make sure that I am no farther than an hour from a major city, one that has a economy, of course. Now, in this case, this house, they're asking $225,000, which I think is not a bad price. I mean, $225,000, you get 1.7 acres, which is not bad. It's close to 2 acres. You get about 1,700 square feet, 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, not shabby. And if you want to read the description of this house, you can. I mean, it's located on 101 North County Road 800 West. It's got a Yorktown, Indiana address, but it's outside of the city limits. So chances are this house is going to have a well and a septic, or maybe it might have city water, but it might have septic, or it could have city sewage, but it might have a well. Typically, in these homes that are located out in the country like this, that's typically what the setup is going to be. And and the thing about this home is, uh, let me give you guys an example. Let's say I was married, and me and my wife, if I had one, which I don't, but just for the sake of this video, let's say I was married and I had a wife, and we decided to have two children together, one son, one daughter. Well, me and my wife, we decided to buy this house. We're just talking hypothetically. This is just an example. So so we decided to buy this house. Now obviously, we don't really need all this land just for one family. However, uh, what my plan would, what my plan with this house would be is, when my kids get older, like they get to the point where they're graduating from high school and they're either thinking about going and pursuing college, or they're going to just go right out in the workforce and do what they do out there. Now, if they wanted to stay home, like stay within where they were raised, which in this example would be here in Yorktown, what I would do is I would go ahead and put up a tiny home. I would put up a couple of tiny homes, one for my daughter and one for my son. That way, when they get older, they don't have to leave the house. I mean, they can still stay living at home, so to speak. But a with this amount of land, I can build additional structures, which would allow them to have a sense of independency and dignity as a young adult. So me and my wife would have our privacy, and the kids would have their privacy. They would be able to go out, date, do what they do with their whoever they date, that type of stuff. And then when they get, and then when they decide to meet their special someone, they decide to marry, and even after they decide to marry, with a lot this big, I can always have the tiny home expanded to where it can accommodate a small family. And that would go for both my son and my daughter. Now, again, I don't have no kids. I'm not married. I'm just giving an example of what I think more families ought to entertain to save money on housing. Because I think the idea that I'm discussing right now, I think would help a lot of families avoid homelessness. So, anyways, I would have it to where I had, like I said, I'll have two tiny homes, one for my daughter, one for my son. And if any of them decided to marry and they decided to start their own family, guess what? They can leave and go wherever they want to go and start their own life, so to speak, if they want to, or they can stay on this property right here and they can save a crap load of money. And honestly, the only thing that I would charge them for would maybe be for a little bit of utilities. I might charge them for a little bit of electric and water, or depending on how much money I had to spend to build a tiny home and have all the utilities connected, I might charge them a little bit of money just to help myself recuperate some of the money. But it would be well below what they would have to pay for a mortgage or what they would have to pay for rent. It'll be real below any of that. Because of this type of a setup, they wouldn't have to wonder. Like, even if they decided, what, when we turn 18, we're going to go off, we're going to go do what we do, we're going to do our own thing, kind of like what I did. Even if they took that path and they wanted to do their own thing and just kind of find themselves, so to speak, okay, cool. I would support that, obviously, because I can relate to that. But at the same time, if they went out here and they got themselves or some into some financial issues like I got myself into, as I explained on my video that I made earlier, or if something happened to them of no fault of their own, like a health condition, an injury, a job loss, and for whatever reason they were having trouble locating another job and money started getting thin and now they're struggling to pay their rent, or if they purchased a home and now they're struggling to pay the mortgage or any of that type of craziness, this type of a setup would provide my two children a place to stay. I mean, I would still have the two smaller home structures on this land, and they would not ever have to worry about homelessness. Obviously, I would buy this house and I would do everything humanly possible to pay off this house ASAP. ASAP means within 10 years. But while I'm talking, let's I'm gonna show y'all some pictures here. And again, this is sitting on 1.69 acres. Pretty nice house. Got a two-car garage, all brick. Looks like you got a wraparound driveway, gravel wraparound driveway. Pretty nice little house. Pretty nice house, I think. You got some of the yard is fenced off. So yeah, with this type of a setup, got you a little pole barn right here. You got some trees in the yard. I mean, honestly, if I really wanted to, I can even take this pole barn. Honestly, this pole barn would be good just the way it is. I wouldn't touch it. I'll just keep it the way it is. I'm not sure how big it is. It looks like it might be big enough to fit some vehicles or at least some yard equipment. So I'll keep it the way it is. But with this massive size yard, almost 2 acres. Here's the inside of the house. Not a bad little house. I thought before I continue to talk, I would show you guys the house real quick. Because I know some of you are curious, well, what does the house look like? So I'm going to show you all real quick. Okay, now back to our discussion. So as I was saying, if my children ever got into a situation any time in their adult life to where they had to come back home and regroup, or maybe they wanted to save some money and build wealth, so they decided to come back home. And it's like, hey, hey, Dad, can we come back home and stay in one of the tiny homes? And I'm like, yeah, no problem, no, it's all good. And like I said, the only thing I would charge them for would be maybe a little bit of utilities. That'd be about it. I wouldn't charge them anything near what they would have to pay if they were renting or paying a mortgage. Because I would want them to build wealth to where one day they can pass on something to their children. To where one day, even with themselves, they can get to the point where, if they wake up one day and they go to their job and their job gets a tripping, they can be like, hey man, fuck you, I'm gone. And be, and just whatever. They can go home and they can go and look for another job, start their own business, or do whatever it is that they do. But whatever they choose to do, they would not have to worry about being homeless because this setup right here would allow me to put up a couple of tiny homes to where my kids, my imaginary children, would never have to be homeless. And their families, if they have many, would not have to worry about homelessness either. Now, in this country, we've gotten away from that type of living. We've gotten away from that. I mean, we've turned into a society where it's every man and woman for themselves, and living with your family is, in this day and age, it seems to be a taboo thing to do. Now, I understand completely that many adults, they ain't trying to be moving back in the crib with their parents. They want their own shit. You know what I'm saying? And I'm one of those kind of people. I ain't gonna lie. Cause like I told you on the video that I made earlier, I could have went to my mom and dad during the last recession for help, but I didn't because I wanted to do what I had to do for myself. But if this type of a setup, I mean, like I said, this type of a setup, my daughter gets a tiny home, and my son would get a tiny home, and it would be their tiny home. It would be theirs. I mean, they wouldn't have to buy it off of me or none of that type of stuff. It would be theirs. It'll be theirs in the same manner as if they came to me and gave me a check and purchased it. It would be theirs, except I wouldn't charge them anything other than a little bit of utilities. Because I mean, and like I said, if they choose to go on and buy a house somewhere else in another area, another state, whatever, okay, cool. But if they come into hard times, or they have a change of heart, and they're looking for a easy and relatively quick way to stack some money up and build wealth, well, not easy and quick, but a way to help them stack money and build wealth, rather. This type of a setup that I just showed you guys would allow that to happen for them, because the money that they would have to pay for rent or mortgage, they can pocket all that money because I'm not going to charge them nothing other than a little bit of utilities, which is going to be a small fraction of what they would have to pay compared to paying mortgage or rent. So all that money, they can pocket that money. They can invest it into a Roth IRA. They can invest it into mutual funds, and they can use it to build wealth. They can use it to build a retirement fund. They can use it to build an FU fund. Kind of like what I was mentioning a little bit ago. Because if I had kids, I wouldn't want my kids to be broke. I wouldn't want my kids to ever have to worry about homelessness. I wouldn't want them to be in a position to where they go to a job and their boss gets to tripping, and they got to deal with it, because if they decide, if you, I'm gone, I'm not being disrespectful like that. Now they got to worry about being in these streets because, if they ain't got that money for the rent, the landlord is going to start the eviction process. And if they can't catch up on all the fees, then it's a wrap. And now they're going to be in these streets. And I would not want that for my children if I had any. So for those of you that have children, if you have the financial means, for those of you that are out here looking to buy a house, whatever state you live in, if you got the financial means, buy something like this. Man, forget forget buying a condo. Condos are pointless. Condos are nothing more than an apartment, than a glorified apartment. If you're gonna buy a condo, you might as well just continue to pay your rent. I'm just saying. Forget buying a new build in a association community to where you're gonna be finessed more in more ways than one. You're gonna be finessed by the builders because they're gonna build you some garbage and then not back their product up, kind of like what I explained on my video that I made earlier about my experience with a new build when I was living in Lewisburg, Tennessee. You're gonna be finessed by the association because for every little infraction that you have, they're going to charge you. They're going to fine you. They're probably not even going to let you know that they fined you. And then one day, by the time you find out that you've been fined, you're going to be fined $10,000. You may not have the $10,000. Next thing you know, they're foreclosing on you. Now, fortunately, there are states like Florida and Georgia that are passing laws against those type of shenanigans. But my attitude is, why even deal with an association in the first place? When you can buy something like this, and you can offer your children an opportunity to build wealth and sustain wealth. Like even like for an example, this house 1.69 acres, 1.7 acres. We'll say, even if you had, let's say, 4 kids. I mean, let me pull up my calculator on my phone here. Give me a second here. Okay, 1.7 divided by 4. Okay, 1.7 divided by 4. That would give each person 0.42 acres, which is close to a half acre for every person, which is plenty of land. So, 4 kids. Each person gets 0.42 acres, which is fairly decent. So, basically, you can fit multiple families on this piece of land. I mean, you like in like the example with myself. If I did have a children, which I don't, but if I did, I mean, obviously, me and my wife, we would have the main house, and then my son, he would have one house. My daughter would have the other, and if I had four kids, they would have each a house of their own as well. Or two, when my kids get older, depending on their situation, they can even decide to stay on this property. And then, of course, I would have a couple of more smaller houses built for them. Now, honestly, I wouldn't want to do much more than maybe five additional houses because after that it gets kind of crowded. But I think you guys get the idea of what I'm suggesting here. Like, rather than overpaying for a condo or overpaying for new construction and then being finessed by HOAs and people like that and scumbags like that, you can buy something like this, out in the country, 1.7 acres. And typically out in the country, your ordinances are going to be a lot more lax compared to living in town. And obviously, it's going to be a lot more lax than living in any HOA. And typically, in many of these rural communities, as long as you have as long as you have a approved permanent structure up, you can build other structures in addition. Most counties, at least in Indiana, are not gonna mind you building additional structures as long as you have a structure that's been approved, like this structure, already up. And in this case, I mean, like this setup right here would be the perfect setup. I mean, you hear people going out and they're buying 7 acres, they're buying 10 acres of land, and then they're building everything from the ground up. They're building everything from scratch. They're having to install rail and septic tanks, and they're having to pull all kind of permits for all that, which is good. I mean, if that's what you want to do, okay, do your thing. I mean, that still could be a wonderful approach to saving your family from homelessness, and plus and plus within the family saving a crap load of money on housing and taking that money instead and building wealth. But I think this right here is a perfect setup because you got your house, you got all of your utilities. All you gotta do is build your additional structures and then put electric in them. Now, as far as it goes for the septic, you might have to pay some money to trace lines to the septic. I don't know. I don't exactly know how that works. Depending on where you live, you'll have to do your own due diligence within the county in which you're going to be living in. But wherever you're living, if you got the financial ability, you're going to want to do something like this. Buy something like this on a large lot. I mean, even if you purchased something that was sitting on, let's say, an acre. Now, obviously, an acre is not going to give you as much room, but even on an acre, you can do something like what I'm suggesting right now. But I really think if more families purchase something like this, and then you have enough land to where when your kids get older, you can build smaller structures on the land, and now your kids can have a place to stay. They would never have to worry about homelessness. Even if they chose to move away, they would always have a home to come back to in the event that they get in financial difficulties, or when that day comes and you pass on, you can pass your children can inherit your property, and then they can do their thing, and now their children can have this type of a setup to where they won't have to go out here and be struggling to pay rent, to pay mortgage, and have to worry about homelessness. And then next thing you know, they're online listening to these phony financial gurus being finessed. So Let me think if I can add anything here. So yeah, I mean, look at this. Beautiful. And honestly, if I was in the market to buy something and I had this money cash, I would grab it up in a second. I'm not even gonna lie to you folks. I would grab it up in a second. I mean, look at this house, man. Look at this. And again, this is located up in Yorktown, Indiana. I mean, you're welcome to, and by the way, I'm on realtor.com. So you're welcome to jump on realtor.com on your own and read all this. I mean, I'm not going to read it for you. You can read it on your own. But this house is turnkey, moving and ready. The house itself has got decent square footage. But just, but just consider at least this setup. Just consider it. At least consider it. Because I think if more families started adopting the idea that I've just described on this video, you would have significantly less homelessness out here. Because you wouldn't have as many people out here needing to, you wouldn't have as many people, I mean, you would have more people living like this. You know, like this house, you got one family in this house, and then you got other families in your tiny homes out here that you would build. And since you already have the original approved structure right here, when it comes to building your tiny home, you don't have to, your tiny homes don't necessarily have to be built with the same level of quality as the main home. At least not right away, because maybe your money might be, maybe you may not have the funds to build anything special. Or two, another option is it'll be a good, temporary option at least. You can always go out and buy some travel trailers and put them on your lot. And you can trace electric from your house to the travel trailer, or I think a much safer way would be is to get your electrician out and then maybe they can put up poles by each travel trailer. That's another option. And again, you would have to do your own due diligence and see what's feasible within the county that you're going to be living in. And another thing is, you know, now you do got people that live out of their automobiles, whether it be a car or a SUV or a van or whatever. Another option is, I mean, if you don't have the money right away to build a tiny home, and let's say you have a older child that's, maybe they're 18, 19, and, they're just getting started out here and they're running into financial difficulties and need to come back home. I mean, obviously, if you got room inside the house, you can always put them in a room. Or if they don't want to come inside the house, if they prefer to be on their own, so to speak, because they could be like me and have too much damn pride to come back to mommy and daddy. Another option is, whatever vehicle they're driving, they can pull up in the yard here or pull up in the driveway, and then what you can do is you can throw an extension cord at them, and then at least at night they'll have electricity to charge up their cell phone, and it will also enable them to sleep comfortably. Like if it's cold, they can have a portable heater. If it's warm, they can have a fan. And then maybe in the morning time, they can come in, use the bathroom, take a shower, prepare something to eat for the day, and get ready for work or whatever. But other than that, they can stay in their car because you got people like myself out here that do not want to live inside a house and then have to abide by the rules in the house. They rather live on their own and do everything for themselves, at least as the best they can and as much as they can. And with that being said, another thing you can do is you can take a section of this yard, fence it, fence the yard, I mean, not the whole yard because that'd be expensive as hell, but you can fence at least a section of the yard with a wooden fence. That way, if any of your grown kids had to come back home, but they chose to remain in their live out of their vehicle, so to speak, that fence would at least provide an element of privacy to where other neighbors ain't gonna be peeking at them and things of that nature. And given that this house is out in the country, I mean, it looks like they do got neighbors, but the neighbors look like they're gonna be far enough away to where they're not gonna be on top of you. They're not gonna be able to see everything you're doing. They're like typically out in many of these rural communities, people tend to mind their own business. People tend to value their privacy. They're not gonna be all up in your business. It's not gonna be like living in the burbs where you're gonna have to deal with a bunch of Karens and they're gonna be crying about some old bullshit. Which is one thing I personally like about living in more rural communities, because you got more, with larger lots, your neighbors are further apart, they're not all up in your business, and that's a beautiful thing. So, all right, folks, I'm gonna go ahead and end it right here. I don't know what else to add to this. I could probably add a little bit more to it, but I think I've spoke long enough. I think you guys get the message. So if you like what I do, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, and while you're at it, subscribe. And on that note, I hope you guys have a blessed rest of the day. I'll catch you guys on the next one.